These are some records that a record store in Brooklyn, near the place I work on Thursdays currently, just threw out. And this is the Best of Burl Ives, which was a 2-record set that came out about 1959, I think. It really doesn't have a lot of things that most people would consider the best, unless you were a folk music fan back in the 1940s and 50s. It doesn't really have his hits, except for Blue Tail Fly and Goober Peas. I listened to some of it. It's okay. Burl, at one time, was my favorite male singer back when I was about 11 or 12 years old, when he had that hit Little Bitty Tear. And we have a group of Al Martino's albums on Capitol Records from the 1960s. This was his big hit, Spanish Eyes. The song I really like on this album is By the River of the Roses. Spanish Eyes had been on an earlier album, but it became a hit single for Al Martino around 1965 or 6. And it was a song that originally was called Moon Over Naples by the German composer and bandleader Bert Kaempfert. When they changed the words to Spanish Eyes, it became a hit record. This is an earlier album which had a hit on it called I Love You More and More Every Day, sort of in a country style. And this one is a monaural record. Well, this was a good record I listened to all the way through tonight. This is Leo Adeo and his orchestra, Hawaii in Hi-Fi, which I've learned was originally on the Vic label, a subsidiary of RCA Victor, and then it was moved to the Camden Budget label after the Vic label was discontinued. And it was recorded in Webster Hall, New York, which is a building in the East Village on East 12th Street, which was a union meeting hall and became a concert venue in the 80s and 90s and up till the present. And this is the Best of Al Martino, which has 10 of his well-known songs, as you can see here. My favorite on this is Mary in the Morning. I have that on a 45 from when it was new in 1967, and it's one of my favorite singles of all time. Even though Al isn't one of my favorite singers, I like his record. Somewhere My Love by Ray Conniff. This is a mono version, which I like having. This was a big hit for Ray back in 1966 after the movie Dr. Zhivago came out. His version of Tie Me Kangaroo Down Sport on here, you might remember that from 1963, was done by Rolf Harris, an Australian. And on this one, it's done by Jay Meyer, one of Ray's male singers in his group. Sentimental Favorites by Connie Francis. This is one of those TV albums. There's a few hits on here, but Who's Sorry Now, I think, is on here. There's another Al Martino album. This was Daddy's Little Girl. And on this one, Mary in the Morning is on this album originally. Yeah, this was a 1968 album, Al Martino, Love is Blue, following the big hit single by the French orchestra leader Paul Mauriat. And this was an earlier album from about 1963 with a hit record, Painted Tainted Rose, which was partially composed by Al's orchestra conductor, Peter DeAngelis. And here's another early 60s Al Martino album, which is kind of country. It's We Could, which was a hit for Little Jimmy Dickens back in the 1960s, and recorded by several other people. Charlie Pride did a record of it. There's other country songs on here. Jealous Heart. Then You Can Tell Me Goodbye was a hit for several people also. You Don't Know Me, Eddie Arnold had a hit with that. Here's a Roger Williams record from the early 70s. Probably the last one that was on the Cap label before they switched all of their labels. MCA owned a Cap, and they changed the name to MCA Records. This is Roger trying to look hip in those 1970s. And it has love themes from Lady Sing the Blues. Sorry about the focus. The camera's doing this on its own. Skyjack theme. How Do You Do? That's a song from Europe. Ben. That was a movie back then. And here's Al Hurt in one of his early RCA albums. Al, He's the King. I see this album a lot. This was about 3 years before he had a hit with the song Java. This was recorded in RCA Studio A, which was on East 24th Street in Manhattan. No longer there. The building was torn down after it became part of Baruch University. And then they demolished that older building and replaced it with a new campus in the 1990s. Percy Faith, around 1970, he did this album, The Windmills of Your Mind. And these are mainly songs from movies that were out at that time. There's Percy and his crowd working in the studio, the singers. He had a lot of hits in the 1950s, and his biggest hit was A Summer Place theme in 1960. There's a 2-record set of Mario Lanza from a TV offer. I don't really know most of these songs, except the Italian ones and Be My Love. And this was the best of Lanza on RCA Records. I have a mono copy of this. This is stereo electronically reprocessed. I have probably the first song I liked of his was The Loveliest Night of the Year, which I have on an album from about 50 years ago. And he died very young. Around 1959, I think. And there's a bunch of Guy Lombardo albums. I'm not a big fan of Guy Lombardo. I actually saw him once at the World's Fair. His orchestra used to play in the evening. I never saw that, but I saw him walking by in the opening day parade in 1965 for the second season of the fair in New York City. And here's another Guy Lombardo. These were on Capitol Records. He went from label to label. This one is in phony stereo, duophonic. These are medleys. Here's more medleys on the Capitol label. 40 songs. They were from Canada originally. Guy and his Royal Canadians. And here's some medleys. There's 2 copies of this. I took them because I didn't know if they'd be bad or not, you know. So, more medleys. And there were so many other records there, I just couldn't carry them. So, that's what I found on the street. And I know this is all considered garbage by a lot of record collectors, but hey, if it's laying around, just take it.